Thank you, Vikram. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Welcome to our session. We're going to be talking about public sector agility accelerator, about how doing agile in a government space. Now, if you're sitting here and you're just about to jump out of the room, don't fear too much. A lot of the things we're talking about here are also relevant in organisations as well, but particularly if you've got an interest in public sector, we certainly look forward to talking to you. So my name's Craig Smith. I'm the Global Agility Lead at SoftEd in Brisbane, Australia, and I spend a lot of time talking to different government agencies on their Agile journey.
And my name is Julian. I work at the Digital Transformation Agency. My role is the head of the Agile practice for the Australian government, and very excited to be here with everyone today.
And just in case you were wondering, even though we have the same surname, we're not stepbrothers. We're not related in any way. We're just good buddies. All right, let's kick off. So this is a picture of the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Now, in a recent address to the public sector, he was talking about the public service and the desire for the service to be focused on the user, and the fact that we need to be more agile and more responsive to the public where we live. In fact, this is a message that we've heard from many previous prime ministers. The word agile is being used more and more, even in the public sector space. And I realize a lot of you are from India. This is a picture. I'm sure you know this person, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This is from the recent Davos conference, and he was talking about the fact of needing to accept change. And we need to be agile and flexible in our policies in line with the changing times. The interesting thing is that this particular speech was previous to the pandemic that we're in right now, but even there's a recognition that we need to change. In fact, if we look here, this is a report from the OECD doing a lot of work in this public sector agility space. They said in this report from 2015, it's vital for governments to be agile to answer tomorrow's challenges in time of fiscal restraint. Now, this report was written in 2015. That's even more so, critical at this juncture. So we need to think differently about what we do and how we do it. This is something that's been happening globally. There's a lot of global initiatives towards this in the public sector space. I alluded just to the OECD and the World Economic Forum there before. They're doing a lot of work. In fact, they've just kicked off this Agile Nations initiative. It was just signed in December 2020. This is essentially at the moment 7 countries: Japan, the UK, the UAE, Singapore, Canada, Italy, and Denmark, who've gotten together and forged to say that we are going to look into more agile ways of governing and agile ways of running government. But there are other places we can go. The Agile Government Center, run by NAPA out of the US, was something that was set up and is funded by Congress. And the whole purpose of that Agile Government Center is to look for different strategic approaches to government. And one of the things they've been talking about is looking at agile principles for government. It's made up of members of Congress, ex-presidents, those type of things. And of course, there's the Agile Assessment Guide that's come out from the GAO in the US. This is quite a lengthy report. It's about 200 pages long, but it's full of best practices for agile adoption and implementation. And so, there's been a lot of work to kind of bring these things together, and a lot of things we can borrow on from around the world.
So with all this talk about Agile, what is Agile anyway? Now, we know the modern form of Agile has originated, traditionally started within IT. This includes the Agile Manifesto for software development, which today is actually this year's its 20th anniversary. And it was basically 17 development experts who got together at a ski lodge who worked out some lightweight approaches to software development. Since that time, since the ski lodge in 2001, we understand that there's been so many different frameworks and methodologies that have come out since that time. Things like SAFe, Scrum, Kanban, XP. There's been so much, an explosion of different methodologies. There's actually a really great speech that Craig has given on this topic called the 40 Agile Methods in 40 Minutes. It's definitely worth a look when you've got time. When you boil down all these different methods and methodologies, you can see that they stem from the 4 values from the Agile Manifesto, from the 12 defining principles as well. And it is really critically important that we see today, working with a number of different organisations and governments around the world, about being true to some of these core values. Now, some government agencies have also released some guides about what isn't Agile. So this one actually comes from the US Department of Defense, and they call it the No Agile BS Guide. They were quite blunt in their language, but it's quite a good read because it talks about what isn't Agile and things to look for. So for example, they said if teams aren't working together with real end users, and if they're not iterating and releasing value constantly, then it's simply not Agile. Now, there's a number of different good points, and I'd highly recommend a read of that. Now, Agile doesn't come easy or in a box. Now, this is a bit of fragile, but Craig and I and others who work with a number of different governments and government organisations find that it is fragile. It isn't something that you can just buy off the shelf. It does take time.
Worries me, Julian, is this kind of overuse of the word agile. So I'm starting a movement. I want to get rid of the word agile and call it something else. Let's just call it raccoon. Julian, are you with me? Who else is with me?
Yep. It's a really great point.
Yeah, this is just the fact that we often overuse this agile word to the point now that people actually roll their eyes when they hear it when you come in. So we've got to stop talking about that and actually start doing. But if you have to refer to it with something else. Right? Use raccoon. It's going to take off. It's going to be the next big thing, Julian.
That's right. The next buzzword. So why Agile? Why should we do Agile or raccoon for that matter? Now, it's all about embracing change. Now, as we know, this VUCA came from 1986 and also used by the US military and others. And it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and some of the antidotes to some of those key challenges we face in our time. Now, the time that we live in has been coined by the World Economic Forum and others as the fourth industrial revolution. Now, as we know, traditional projects that we used to work on was quite similar to a catapult. We kind of load up a lot of requirements, large specifications, large business cases, and a lot of money with it, and we try and shoot off to try and hit our target. But now the fourth industrial revolution brings complexity. We're operating in an environment where we've got rapidly changing socio-economic changes. We've got rapid technology change, digital disruption. We've got market forces that are pulling us in every direction. And we also have changing citizen expectation, customer expectations. Our citizens and customers today expect things to be delivered digitally in terms of the channels that they're working with. So this makes the traditional type of IT very difficult because we no longer have 3 or 4 years to hit the target. The target is constantly moving. This requires a change in approach. So it's quite similar to a slingshot. It's about getting closer to the target, making it less risky and testing some of our critical assumptions up front. Now, the Agile approach has been proven through countless research and studies to realize value quicker and faster because we're actually doing things in faster cycles and in smaller batches. And also it helps us reduce risk because we upfront the risk upfront first and we test some of the riskiest things upfront, like security, for example. Now, with this enhanced approach in smaller size projects, it requires us to have a better understanding about what value actually is. If we're going to move from a project which took 1 year or 5 years or 10 years down to a week or to a day, in some cases, it requires us to understand what is value. So as we've heard a lot in the conference so far, we heard about the traditional triple constraints of scope, cost, and schedule. And this has driven project management for the last couple of decades. Now, Jim Hines-Smith came out with the Agile triangle. Now, those constraints don't magically go away. We still have budget constraints and schedules, but the most important thing at the top of the triangle is value. And this is also talked about in the manifesto as well. So value, quality, and constraints are some of the key things in an Agile world. Now, through all the different reports, particularly the ones that Craig has highlighted earlier from OECD and World Economic Forum, they talk about putting the customer or the citizen at the center. So it's extremely important to do that as part of not only designing our services, but also testing it with them as well. Now, there's some really great frameworks out there. We won't get too much into them today, but we'll send some links through about how to identify value. So if we're doing things in a week's time, how can we see what is the most valuable? Now, this is from Harvard Business Review, which talks about the different elements of value for customers.
So one of the things that a lot of governments have started to do is this idea of a digital service standard. What we're seeing is the digital service standard from the DTA, who Julian represents here in Australia, that has 13 different parts to it. You can see number 3, and 3 really talks about the agile and user-centered approach. But the other ones also have interesting detail as well. Number 1 talks about user needs. Number 5 talks about data, responsive design, all those kinds of things that are actually really important for us to build a good product. Now, this isn't only something we've been doing in Australia, it's actually something that's happening around the world. There's many different governments doing this, including the Singapore government. UK was the granddaddy of this with their digital service standard from gov.uk. New Zealand have taken the Australian one and copied it a little bit. The US government has their digital services playbook. And even in India, there is a digital services life cycle that's been doing the rounds, although it's a little lengthy for my liking. Probably a little work still to be done on that, but it's been around for a few years. Here's the thing is that if we think about, right, it's about bringing these things together, and there's this basis of human-centered design. And if you're in the last session about product, this was something that was talked about. It's about designing the right thing and designing the thing right. And so we have discovery and empathizing with the customer, where we really go wide and then we come down and converge on definition. And then to design the thing right, we prototype, we ideate before we come back and validate by running experiments. And the thing is that this has to run over and over and over again. This isn't just a one-time thing. It's an iterative process in its own right. And the thing is, you have to put all this stuff together. We have to have a design thinking and agile mindset. This is a diagram from Johnny Schneider, which kind of just represents the fact that this is just an amorphous blob. We have to have all 3 of these things: lean mindset, design thinking, and agile mindset, to successfully build products. You can't do any one individually, yet a lot of the time we have an agile transformation that is separate to an organizational transformation that is separate maybe to a human-centered design approach. Unless all 3 of those things are running together, you're not going to have successful products or successful services that we're often trying to do in the public service. And so what happens is we end up with this faux agile or fake agile or dark agile. There's lots of different names go around for it. But essentially what it is that we're doing some agile processes. We've got some teams, they're standing in circles, they're putting sticky notes on the wall or using tools like Jira. But in the end, right, it's all kind of a bit fake because it's just a wallpaper on top of a more traditional waterfall type process. And they're the things we have to change. And so the DTA in Australia, as well as gov.uk and others, have described a process that looks much like this. This is direct from the Little Book of Digital, which you can download from the Australian DTA website. Julian's holding it up there right now. Hold that up, Julian, and give it the display. And you can download a PDF of that if you're interested. What it describes is this idea of discovery, generally a few weeks. Alpha takes a few weeks to a few months. Beta takes a few months where you're kind of taking it and actually doing the code before you kind of run it to live. That all sounds actually quite nice, but what we see in reality actually looks a lot more like this. It's kind of more of a waterfall. These processes we go through discovery and we need a little longer because we need to get the funding and put all the things in place. And then we go to alpha and we're never really sure when we're done. So we end up constraining the development, which is the beta process. And then we have this big bang to go live. And as you can see below, it just ends up looking like a waterfall, which was never the intent.
All right, so now we'll do a bit of an activity about exploring how fast you flow. What are some of the challenges that you're faced with in terms of realizing value from idea straight through to value? So what we'll do is we'll post into the chat window a link for the activity. So if you could please find that there. Once you click on the link, you will see something, you will see the activity. Number 1. So hopefully everyone can see that coming through. If you do have any issues with the link, please let us know.
You just have to click the big red button that says enter as visitor. You don't need to put in any details.
Yep. All right, fantastic. So what you can see probably on the screen here is we've got a bit like a staircase from ID generation all the way through to customer value. So ID generation, approve budget, mobilize and define scope, conduct user research, analysis, design, build, test, deploy and ship, and cut right through to customer value. Underneath each one of these steps, we have 4 options. How long does it typically take for you to get past these steps? Does it take 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 3 or plus months? So what we'll do in this activity is spend 2 minutes and we'll have a bit of a vote. So when the voting session begins, you'll be able to click on underneath each one. You've got one vote for each step. How long does it typically take you to do each one of these steps? All right, so we will start the voting and you will have 7 votes. So that's for each step. And will start now. So if you've got any questions, please let us know. So just spend 2 minutes just considering how long on average does it take for you to complete each one of these steps.
Don't overthink it. We'll see what the consensus is.
If you do have any questions as well, please feel free to let us know or use the chat, and we'll try and answer them for you. So let's click in for each step. How long does it take on average? There's no right or wrong answers in this, so this will just give us a bit of a feel and also a bit of input to the next activity.
A minute left. I think everybody might have gone to sleep, Julian. Not seeing too many votes going on there.
Please encourage to go on the, click the link, click on the buttons. You won't be, it's anonymous by the way as well, so you won't see the results from individuals. Yeah, will give us a good sense for the next part. Okay, so we've got 20 seconds left. Okay, 10 seconds left, so hopefully everyone's been able to get in there. All right, fantastic. So that's into the voting session there. Okay, so what we can identify from that activity, and please take some of these learnings, particularly on to the last activity. We've got this problem-solving item which can help us realise value quicker. So we're very excited about that. But it looks like product development, 3 months. I think a few people there, 4 weeks for mobilise and define the scope, and also 4 weeks for idea generation. So that's quite fascinating. By the way, we'll also share some of these insights as well later too.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting result, Julian, because you know, maybe it's just the people we have voting here, but you know, when we've done this in other places, you know, particularly things like you know, idea generation, you know, that's just not the amount of time you spend in the team, but it's the amount of time that the organization has spent to get that from go to woe. Not just how long it takes to approve the budget, but how long it actually takes to get through that entire budgeting cycle. And you know, maybe just our friends on this call have got this licked, but we find that normally goes in the other way. In fact, we kind of, you know, look, it ends up with what we call a Scrum Fall. You know, we have this, you know, it's interesting that actually, you know, the one that everyone put as the highest number on there was the build and the test takes 3+ months. You know, that's the kind of the bit where we actually, you know, have been doing this work over a long period of time. Scrum since 1995 says 2-week sprints, 2-week sprints with potentially shippable increments. This whole idea of, you know, continuous delivery, this should be the bit that's actually the fast part. But actually what happens is on both sides, this is where it gets really slow, is even though you might be able to get the idea out or approve the budget, it tends to be very slow into that part, and it tends to be slow on the other side in actually getting the thing shipped out, particularly in public sector organizations. And so we need to do better. And so if we look at the diagram I showed you before, right, what the diagram was meant to say was this. So it said that discovery takes a few weeks, but that is to mobilize and understand the problem. When we talked about alpha taking a few weeks to a few months, that is continuous iterations that every couple of weeks we then move stuff onto beta. Jeff Patton often talks about this dual track kind of discovery. That's exactly what we need to be doing there, not just waiting for the next step. When you get into beta, which is where you actually do the work, yes, that can take a few weeks to a few months, like we said, but it's a continuous delivery going to live. And in between that, there's lightweight governance. And of course, there is measures going backwards and forwards that tell us things that we've learned and things we've measured so it can be built into the rest of the cycle. That's how we get the true spirit of agility. Agile isn't any faster or cheaper. We get it to be faster and cheaper because we get smarter in the way that we actually deliver our value. Now, one of the things we did notice when we were looking at the Indian government digital service standard is that there's a large prominence on auditing. Not sure that's entirely right, but I guess it's government, and sometimes that's the case. We even have that though back in Australia and in other countries, and does need to be assessments in governments around this. Using things like a definition of done is very useful, and so we've done some work. It's very hard to read the slide, but we've done some work on a definition of done for each of the steps. It's something we'll share with you at the end of the class if you're interested in how you might audit this and look at what your definition of done is for every stage.
So how can we reduce waste in the system to deliver value faster? How can we shorten that value stream to realise value and test some of our critical assumptions earlier? So it's quite interesting to see that project waste isn't something unique to individual countries or areas. It's a global issue. So the PMI produces a report called the Pulse of the Profession and measures project waste across the world. This probably doesn't take into account what isn't being reported. So it is probably much higher too. The US government...
Did you just see India on there, Julian? India, 81 million per 100 million. That's a lot of money. That's in American dollars.
That's right. It's a lot of money, and you can think of where that could be redirected. In Australia, we're actually on the bottom of the pile, so we've got a lot of work to do. But it really shows a lot of that investment could go to improve other things as well. The US Department of Defense released some presentations, some other things about their journey, and they're quite big into it because they see it not only as something to improve team performance, but also as a tactical advantage on the battlefield. If they can move quicker and faster than the enemy, then they may win the battles and wars. So it's interesting seeing some of their work from the US Department, where they looked at, for instance, the top bit of that, the blue chevrons, about the requirements analysis, design, and development. That's the traditional approach. When they went to a more agile approach, it was interesting their talk because they said what changed? Everything, from culture to the governance to the funding. The transformation was quite large.
So how do we accelerate government agility then in public service? And this also holds true for large organizations. Well, it's all about business agility. What we're showing here is this is the enterprise business agility model. It's a great little model if you want to go check it out online. It starts with team agility. I think we got this licked. We all know about scrums and daily stand-ups and teams, and Scrum's been around for 25 years now. Measuring team health and self-learning and all that kind of stuff is just par for the course. And we've been scaling for a while now, right? Team of teams. So how do we scale it? There's plenty of scaling frameworks and approaches out there. Things like DevOps, where we bring operations closer together. And we've been talking about leadership and culture. And so if we think about where we are often on our journey, it's probably about here in the green slot somewhere. The things that we really need to lick, particularly in the public service, is that organizational agility, is actually leaning out the portfolio. Instead of at the beginning of a financial year, we're starting 100 projects at once because the funding starts, being smarter about, those lean processes, getting the value stream, how it goes from beginning to end, and reducing the cycle time from the time we have an idea to the time it actually hits the hands of an end user or citizen. And, being more mature in our services and our lean products. That, of course, brings us on to then the rest of the organization, having a customer seat at the table and all those supporting services like HR and talent, ops, finance, legal, all those other places that often become the roadblocks to get us getting true agility, because true agility is the end. It's the enterprise business agility where we can anticipate customer needs, disrupt, before we've been disrupted, sustain a learning culture. But until we put all those other pieces in place, we're not going to see the true benefits of agility. So we've still got a long way to go in large organizations and in government. And, you may have all seen the work of Frederick Laloux in Reinventing Organizations. When we think about government, right, they're very much down the bottom of this cycle. Red is the mafia, right? We're only one step above that, right? Which is, the yellow one where there's, this kind of stability and bureaucracy going on. But we have to slowly move because, large organizations, they sit in that red zone. They're moving towards the green. Green is where the true spirit of agility lives. Things like delighting customers, engagement, and balance. And ideally, we'd like to move towards the teal space, which is the unicorn, of these kind of higher purpose and distributed decision making and all those type of things. But I think we've got a way to go, but we have to be moving through this cycle. And we have to be aware of Conway's law that says that essentially organizations design systems and services around their communication structure. So if you've ever tried to communicate with the government, you're not even sure which department you go to, let alone where you might find the service. was just logging on to a government website just before, couldn't find what I wanted, and realized, even though I thought it was the department, that did passports, it wasn't the one that did passports. So, we've got to get better at that. Large organizations suffer the same problem.
So what is public sector agility? There's so many different guides out there. There's so many different things we talked about. One definition that we've worked together on producing, which feeds on from OECD, World Economic Forum, as well as others, is the ability for government entities to operate successfully in a rapidly changing, complex operating environment by producing high quality, high performance, citizen-centric goods and services. So this is what it's all about. It's about operating better, producing better quality, better outcomes for our citizens and our customers. Now, as part of this work, Craig and I have gone through and looked at all the different models and methods that are out there, from OECD, from World Economic Forum, from the US government, from broader research, from Deloitte, et cetera, and McKinsey as well. And we looked at what are some of the key elements, and also from case studies, what has been successful around the world, what has actually made a noticeable difference. And we're actually very excited today to show a model to help guide government, whether it's government agencies, non-profit organisations, or large corporates, in how they can actually take advantage and operate successfully in this fourth industrial revolution. Now, the basis of this approach that we're very excited to show you in the next slide takes a systems approach to agility. So it's looking at all the different moving parts within your organisation. What are some of the key levers that are either preventing or holding you back from becoming more agile and responsive? It looks at also some of the key problems and issue points. For instance, culture continually comes up, like in the State of Agile report globally. So how can that be addressed? So it's looking at the broader ecosystem about how to enable agility.
So as Julian alluded to, we sort of took all this away and we came up with this idea of a government agility model. We're excited to show this to you today. So what it looks like is it's very much like you've probably seen these diagrams before, right? That they look like a house. So this is, I guess, the house of government. The ironic thing is house of governments often look like this with lots of pillars and things. And the key is the foundation, always the foundation. And so at the foundation of our model, obviously the Agile values and principles from the manifesto or from other places that perhaps you take those values and principles, right? Strong foundation based on Agile thinking. Of course, we need enabling technology. Now, regardless of whether you're building products or services, or even if you're building new policy, we need enabling technology to do that. So in 2021, we need good cloud access. We need good networks, and we need good hardware and software to be able to communicate. And of course, we've seen through the pandemic being able to have good collaboration tools that support that. That's been vital. And of course, the other foundation is the day-to-day operations. I think our government departments are doing reasonably well at that. In being able to push through, but that has to be maintained. People have to have a way of, being able to communicate with the government and being able to access those services. We then actually move on to the 7 pillars. Julian, you want to take us through the first couple?
Yes. So the first one is citizen centricity. So this is going back to previous slides, which talks about the importance of user research, systems and design thinking, life event journey, co-design, rapid feedback loops, and testing hypotheses. The next pillar talks about portfolio management. So how do we make decisions within government that enables that rapid decentralized decision-making to enable us to go and test our hypotheses much, much sooner? So a lot of governments that we know around the world have a yearly budget cycle, for example. So how can we have funding to test our assumptions and critical assumptions when it's needed? COVID's a great example. It came out of the blue. Digital disruption is another thing too. So how can we make our processes much more lean and efficient? We then look at organizational structure design. So optimize hierarchy, resource fluidity and mobility, structural flexibility, collaboration and more. And then on to leadership and culture. From numerous surveys, leadership and culture continually comes up as one of the top key issues. But how can we ensure that we provide that psychological safety for teams to go and test things and even fail in government? How can we enable that within large organisations as well? Agile leadership, decentralised decision-making. How can the people closest to the end users make decisions and being able to do so?
If we look at service and product management, I mean, we've often talked about, multidisciplined agile teams, but how often does that really happen where you have the true team together that can take the thing from end to end? So it's not just an IT team with a couple of business people tacked on, it's a true multidisciplinary co-located self-organizing team. Planning at scale, actually doing that a lot better. Being able to be innovative, using data. We have so much data that comes to us. How do we use that to make better decision-making rather than just gut feels? Being able to build quality build services and rethink the way that we approach testing and verification. And of course, good experimentation and feedback. Continuous improvement. How do we become better by being learning organizations or a learning government? Learning from these things, optimizing the whole process, using things like communities of practice, being able to do good capability uplift. Julian and I had the honor of talking to an ex-prime minister just recently where, one of his biggest concerns was the dumbing down of the public sector, because they're always having to go out to consultants. Now, a lot of us on this call may be consultants, but part of our job should be about uplifting that, rather than just always coming in and doing the work for them, right? So coming and supporting, not just doing it. Continuous improvement and people and talent management. We should have a queue to join. There are so many innovative, awesome projects happening in government all the time. How do we actually make it somewhere that people want to go? And then, of course, technology we talked about later. Being able to do things like DevSecOps, right? Security is a big thing in government. It's often one of the things that's the anchor to our process. But how can we actually build that into continuous delivery pipelines and encourage technical excellence and thinking outside the square, getting better at automation and emerging new modern technologies we need it? Because all of that then flows up to the roof, which is really what we're after is valuable and timely outcomes. That's the promise of agility. But until we start to address some of the things in this model, we're going to be a bit stuck. So in order to do that, we're going to take a little bit of a look at the model, aren't we, Julian? We're going to let people have a bit of explore of it.
Yes, that's right, Craig. So what we'll do for this activity is we'll paste the link into the chat as well. Please click on the link. Once you click on the link, we will now explore together as a collective global team what are some of the key issues that we find. So you'll find this screen. And firstly, we'll be examining what is working well. So quite similar to last time, this is a voting thing, and this will really help us to think about what is really working well within your government agency, within your large organisation. So we'll start a voting session. Now you'll have 10 votes each, and so we'll begin the voting, and 3 minutes. So if you could please read the model. Now we'll use this insights for the following section as well, which will be our bold next step. So what can we do to improve? So please click on the boxes. Now the boxes that you can click on are the ones with the white with the black outline. So it's within the pillars. So pick the top 10. What do you think is doing really well within your organisation today?
And if you don't have 10, that's okay. We've just given you 10 votes for that. Please be honest with your votes. This is anonymous. We're trying to see if we can learn some things from this model about where we're actually doing things well. And in our next section, we'll talk about where we can improve. Remember, if you're logging in, you just have to click enter as visitor. You don't need to log in. .90 seconds remaining. If anyone has any questions about any of the boxes, please feel free to ask them. Seeing any trends at the moment, Julian?
I think at this stage, we've got to wait for the end, actually, because it's a hidden vote. So I guess we'll see then. But please encourage people to click on the boxes. And quite a few people have some votes left. So please feel free to click on the ones. So you don't necessarily need to use all 10, but click on the boxes that you think what your organisation is doing well at. And it's really good to familiarise yourself with the model as well. which we'll use in the following section about what improvements we can identify.
It's our 10-minute kick-out warning, Julian. We're doing well on time.
Yeah, just last 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Right.
No worries.
15 seconds remaining on this.
So we'll end that voting session. So that was quite interesting. It looks like user research was number one, Agile leadership and others. And we've done this actually with the entire Australian government, which was multiple agencies. And that actually, strangely enough, was also the number one thing too. So that's fantastic. What we'll do is we might just do quickly the next activity, but this time just giving a minute for the results. So I've just put in in the chat window, the second hyperlink. So if you could please click on that, and this is what could be improved. So very similar to last time, we'll just give it a minute, noting we've only got not that long left. So we'll start that, we'll begin voting. So this is what could be improved. So what do you think is not working so well? What do you think could be improved within your government agency or organisation? What areas do you think are most important to address? And this is really vital, particularly for the next part about looking at what are some of the bold next steps we can take.
45 seconds remaining. Can I click all of them, Julian?
You can. Feel free to. You've only got 10 though, Craig, I'm sorry. But you can keep on clicking.
Interesting thing about this model has been it's been well received by people because it really starts to help you get to the heart of where the problems are and the fact that you need to have things in all of the pillars. All right, 10 seconds left.
Nice, people are voting. So we've got a few who
thank you for everyone who's playing.
Yep, that's really fantastic. Okay, so we'll end the voting session there. So we can see that data-driven decision-making, decentralized decision-making, people and talent management, and we do see that quite a lot as well when we've done this with entire governments. Decentralized decision-making does come up. So thank you so much. We'll share all these results as well as we go.
Yeah, and you can find this if you want to go and read some more about it. This is still a work in progress. So if you have feedback, we'd love to hear from you. We're currently working on some explanations for the boxes so that they make a little more sense. We'll be releasing those very soon. But at the moment, you can find the working version of it at governmentagilitymodel.com, and we'd love to talk to you further and get your feedback. All right, so time to touch down. Let's wrap this up. Let's look at how we can accelerate agility.
So we talked a lot about the complex world that we're living in and the need today for agility in the public sector.
Yeah, we talked about the digital service standard being a default way of operating. So you need to live and breathe that. If your country doesn't have a digital service standard, look to some of the other ones and perhaps open up the conversation to be able to create it.
We talked a bit about reducing the size of our projects for things that used to take years down to months, weeks, or even days.
Value, super important. We need to focus on understanding and realize that value. There's way too much waste in our processes. We'll see in just a second.
We need to bring the citizens to the table. In government, we've got the privilege to work on some of the most wicked issues that we have in society, from whether it's healthcare, COVID is a key example, policing, through to a wide range of different topics. So how can we involve citizens as part of our decision-making process?
And as I said before, not only value, but reduce waste, right? Way too much of it. And we saw those results from PMI.
And finally, we need to focus on government business agility. So looking at all those different pillars and making sure that we can hold up the roof to support agility. So for the last activity, could please ask you to put in the chat window what you'll take away from this presentation. What will be the bold next steps to help your government to achieve better outcomes for your citizens or for your customers? What do you think you could take away that will make a measurable improvement? And we really do encourage people to do this because it does mean you get a lot of value from today's session. So thank you so much, everyone, today.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us today. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. We'll also be around if you need us. Our details are there. We'll share the link. Julian will put the link to the government agility model in there, and the slides will be there for you to share as well. Yeah, thank you and enjoy the rest of the Unconference. If we've got time for any questions, we're willing to take them now.
Sure. Craig, we have just 1 minute, so we can take one quick question. Anyone you can nominate or you can pull it from the audience.
I have just one question, and which is, how difficult was it to convince the government body with whom you are working?
Well, it kind of helps a little bit that Julian is part of the. So Australia has a digital transformation agency. Although interestingly, you think they were making things a lot easier, wouldn't you, Julian? But you know that certainly helps. That organisation was set up to be the I guess to try and transform lots of different changes through the through the government, but has had different levels of success. It's been a long road, Julian.
It has been long and painful. One great book I like is actually from Cotter. He does a lot of great work about change and looking for a coalition of powerful people to form and instill change. And we're still doing it today. We're still on the journey within the Australian context. But look, we've also got a global outreach. How can we help each other as global citizens to deliver better outcomes for all the people that we serve? So I'd encourage people, connect with me, connect with Craig. We're really keen to work with each other to see how we can solve some of these wicked problems that we're faced with today.
Yeah, Deepti, we just have to start. That's the key. We need to start, and yeah, that's the journey.
Yeah, like most cases, we have to start from somewhere. Got it.